Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining to learn about NextG Alliance's roadmap to 6G. I'm Doug Castor from InterDigital, and I have been editor of the NextG Alliance Roadmap to 6G report. And on behalf of the roadmap leadership team listed here and all the members of the Alliance, we are pleased to present this report. So NextG Alliance is not the first to release a vision paper on 6G, so I think it's a fair question to start off asking, what is different about 6G in this roadmap report? Well, this report takes a North American viewpoint to address the goals and the priorities needed to build 6G leadership in North America. And this calls for a change in approach in North America compared to previous generations. We need an approach that is preemptive and one that starts with laying foundations and building stakeholder involvement early. To the left of the slide shown here is the cover page of the report, which you can access on the NextG Alliance website. The content of the report has been built by our broad ecosystem of members. And when we started writing this report in June of last year, we had 46 members and nearly doubled the membership before completing this version of the report. So going forward, there's more to build upon with the foundation presented here as new members and future members continues to bring their views. So what is the NextG Alliance 6G vision? We refer to this as a foundational vision because it will evolve and grow as our work continues. And the report has nearly 50 pages of information that defines our vision in the form of three main components. The first is a set of six audacious goals. Then we have a roadmap which considers every stage of the life cycle and the stakeholders along the way. And finally, we outline a set of 6G leadership research priorities, which were developed across our key working areas, the application areas, the societal needs, the economic goals, government actions, and technology developments. So as I mentioned, we have six 6G audacious goals, and these were selected by our membership as the top North American priorities and ambitions for 6G. So looking at the figure on the right, we list these six goals, and I'll read these off as we move around clockwise. The first is trust, security, and resilience. Then we have enhanced digital world experiences, cost-efficient solutions, distributed cloud and communication systems, AI native wireless, and finally sustainability. And I'll go through each of these in the upcoming slides, but I do want to call attention to the figure on the left with the tiers. So each tier represents a different level of stakeholders that need to be aligned in order to maximize synergies. And we built the goal descriptions on this three-tier structure. So we describe each goal in terms of its national imperative. And this is how the government and our business stakeholders and we keep them in mind when we describe the goal for national imperatives. We also look at the goal in terms of the application in the market, where we need to consider the users of 6G, including the new vertical markets. And of course, in the bottom tier, the technology. This is the nuts and bolts of what makes 6G work and the associated innovations that are needed. So trust, security, and resilience was the first goal that was quickly identified by the membership. And really not a week goes by where we don't hear about another hacker or ransomware incident. Meanwhile, post-pandemic, we are transitioning to a greater amount of remote working and learning, and even a greater amount of socialization than was in place compared to when we originally designed 5G. So the 6G system must be trusted, safe, and reliable in all circumstances. And each of these audacious goals, provided examples of the national imperatives and the research challenges that help describe some of the why, what, and how associated with each goal. And there are more examples of each of these in the report. So for instance, under national imperatives, accelerating the digital transformation and the economic growth associated with it cannot happen without trusted systems. And securing the supply chain will clearly be a continued national concern as we develop the approach to 6G. The research challenges on the right cut through use cases such as mission critical systems, techniques for security and privacy of hardware and data, and the use of artificial intelligence, which for the first time will be natively designed into cellular systems. The second audacious goal is for 6G to enable digital world experiences. And what we mean by this is a set of multidimensional, multi-party, and multi-sensory experiences that go beyond sight and sound. And these will bring life-improving use cases and create new economic value. There's a philosopher named David Chalmers at New York University who has a saying, virtual reality is genuine reality, so let's embrace it. So in other words, AR, VR, and XR experiences point to where humanity is heading. And if you think about it, this really should be no surprise since communication advancement has time and time again been driven by better ways to enable remote experiences that mimic our physical experiences. So DWE, as we call it, can be led in North America thanks to our combined strength in cloud computing and communications. And the need for improved education, healthcare, and workforce development also are important here. So on the research side, cyber physical technologies in the area of haptics and positioning are critical, as are open and interoperable standards that promote adoption and reuse of these DWE technologies. Cost efficiency is our third goal. All aspects of the 6G architecture, which means devices, wireless access, core networks, cell site backhaul, as well as energy efficiency. These all must be addressed, and these must be done uniformly to promote digital equity across urban, rural, and suburban regions. Affordable access to wireless services has become essential to American lives. Yet the FCC broadband map, for instance, shows that less than 24% of the US population is covered by 1 gigabit per second service. And if you want 250 megabit per second service, 51% of the population has a choice of just one operator. So on the research side, the solutions are not just about new technologies that, for instance, deal with more spectrum or more spectrum efficiency solutions. But we also need to consider the business model innovations and better sharing of equipment and shared space deployments and improving on affordable access. So goal 4 covers distributed cloud and communication systems. The NextG Alliance membership includes significant North American expertise in cloud and edge computing, and those companies provide strong support into this goal. This goal is about better unifying cloud and communication systems so that greater scalability is possible across all components of the network. And of course, jointly designing compute and communications will better address the needs of low latency mission critical systems, as well as provide a new platform for new service innovation. So if you take a use case like automotive safety, for instance, North America has more use of personal automobiles in our commutes than any other region in the world. And as we move closer to self-driving cars, these low latency mission critical services are essential. Essential so that collision avoidance decisions can be processed in a distributed cloud as opposed to a distant cloud. So the key research areas on the right here include technologies that facilitate deployment and large-scale networks, the use of edge devices as part of the computing fabric, and finally enabling automated decision-making via distributed and federated learning. Okay, AI native means that we want to build 6G with artificial intelligence included into major components of the design. And we do this right from the beginning, rather than as an afterthought like we are seeing with today's 5G advanced updates. AI is both a technology and a tool, and that will take us beyond the capabilities of 5G, which was developed using more traditional signal processing approaches. The targeted goal is to build 6G AI natively, which will increase the robustness, performance, and efficiencies. And this will enable 6G to be more diverse than ever in terms of data services and deployments, as well as the ability to deal with more challenging spectrum situations. So under national imperatives, AI has clearly become a national imperative because of its foundational technology that influences so many markets. And the governments have recognized that AI is a driver of each country's core competencies. In North America, the wireless industry has a key role to play here, and in particular, bringing our expertise in privacy and data security matters. North American values for ethical use of AI, they also need to be preserved when developing technology here. The research challenges are enormous, and all system elements, including terminals, base stations, core networks, and cloud systems, all of these are expected to run some form of AI and ML for 6G. There will be challenges with computational complexity, energy efficiencies, and scalability. Availability of data sets is a very well-known problem, which also gets into sharing, validating, and standardizing data sets. Lastly, open architectures and interoperability will be key so that AI applications can be deployed across platforms. So finally, the last of the 6 goals is sustainability. Global climate change and the need to reduce our carbon footprint make it critical that 6G considers the most energy efficient technologies. But our vision goes beyond just energy efficiency and includes the need to weave sustainability through all phases of the roadmap lifecycle. Everything from better researching ways to extract raw materials to helping consumers be more environmentally responsible in their decisions, and also to recycling materials that would otherwise get thrown into landfills. So an example to put this into perspective, scalability of IoT devices cannot happen unless we solve these problems. Let's assume that we have devices with a 10-year battery life. The vision of 1 trillion IoT devices, for example, would require us to replace nearly 300 million batteries every day. And that's simply not sustainable in many ways. North America has a role to play in global climate change and has key expertise in the areas listed here: component design and manufacturing, advanced data modeling and optimization, power efficient radio technologies, and carbon neutral data center facilities. On the side of the research challenges, energy reduction is probably the most notable research challenge, but we shouldn't forget about the technology to preserve our land and water resources. In a report, you'll also read about the importance of green credentials and metrics to promote resource efficiency. So that covers the 6 audacious goals, and they are a major part of the components of our 6G vision. But there are a few more parts that I'm going to cover before concluding. The title of the report is Roadmap to 6G, so I would be remiss for not discussing the path and discussing a path and a destination. Or in other words, thinking about what are the desired outcomes. So that's the purpose of these next 2 slides. The life cycle and roadmap shown on this slide is NextG Alliance's order for various stages of work over the next decade. So today we're in a heavy research phase and many of the key research priorities have been defined. And next we'll move into preparing development and manufacturing. And here we mean prototypes and technology demonstrations and collaborating with governments to promote domestic development and production. The standardization phase closely follows that, where NextG Alliance will need to align needs and goals and influence 6G global standards. And on market readiness, industry and governments have to align on policies and incentives, which in turn will pave the way to realization. And realization is something I'll cover in the next slide, where I'll talk more about the ambitions of North American leadership throughout the life cycle. So more specifically, these are the desired outcomes of North American leadership. First, we want a more powerful work collaboration across industry and government. Next, we'll need a robust marketplace that uses innovation and new applications to deliver on the audacious goals that we discussed earlier. And finally, we want increased ownership of the technology advancements in areas that are related to domestic intellectual property ownership and production capabilities, for instance. On the right-hand side, there's always the key question that people usually ask, and that's, what is going to be distinct or different about 6G compared to 5G? And here are some of the examples that are covered in the report. We should expect a multidimensional, multi-party, and multi-sensory experiences. These are experiences that move beyond just the sight and sound. We want to design for an AI native, trusted, and ethical AI. There's a lot of interest in using higher frequencies for higher data rates in the terahertz and sub-terahertz ranges. and as well as dual use of this spectrum for communications and sensing, for example. 6G will be designed with sustainability in mind and consider new technologies such as zero energy devices. And finally, quality of life and work experiences will be transformed as a much broader marketplace of applications using 6G is developed. In the upcoming panels at our event today, you'll be hearing from other NextG Alliance leaders about our priority research areas. And the back half of the roadmap report covers several of the key research areas that are here. So I wanted to call attention to some of that content. In the area of social and economic needs, or SEN as we call it, we cover intended outcomes such as digital equity, trust, sustainability, economic growth, and quality of life. And our Green G area is an area for developing priorities around the environment and energy efficiencies. The technology area is a big group where we have 5 categories, starting with component technologies, radio technologies, operational and maintenance, system architectures, and trust. And we have an applications group which define priorities in terms of foundational areas such as the quality of everyday living, addressing societal goals, quality of mission critical services, and quality of user experience. And finally, our spectrum group is looking at priorities across 6G KPIs, looking at management and access mechanisms, as well as policy and licensing model changes. So what's next on our roadmap work? Well, working with government early in the life cycle is critical, and we'll look to increase our building of those relationships and increasing our government membership. Research initiatives need to move forward to develop requirements and KPIs. And we'll continue being part of the global consensus building. And we'll do that by bringing contributions to the ITUR Vision for 2030 and Beyond report, for example. And finally, on the last point on facilitating, NextG Alliance is a great place to be for North American companies to come together and partner on building a strong leadership position for 6G. This roadmap work has an important responsibility to facilitate the partnering across industry, government, and academia. So please join us if you're able to participate, and please stay tuned to learn more about the roadmap to 6G. Thank you for listening, and please feel free to continue asking questions in the Q&A box. So next on our agenda is a panel on delivering the future of 6G innovation, which will be moderated by Amitabh Ghosh of Nokia, who is also chair of the National 6G Roadmap Working Group and provided great leadership over the roadmap report. And he'll be joined on the panel by several members of the NextG Alliance leadership. So Amitabh, over to you.